Hey guys, it's Jay Calderon with 12rounder.com. Here to give you the aftermath to the Barclays Center event that was promoted by Golden Boy. Obviously took place in Brooklyn. Showtime was the broadcaster. In the main event, we saw, in non-title action, World Junior Welterweight Champion Danny Garcia take on Rod Salka. Pretty much did what we expected him to do. He, made quick work of him, considering the circumstances and considering how much flack he was getting for this sort of fight taking place in the first place. And for the record, he's had quite a tough schedule, so it's not as though he didn't deserve one gimme. But that being said, considering the circumstances, considering the fight itself, he did as well as you could have expected him. The best result he could have possibly got out of this fight, he got. He stopped him in brutal fashion in 2 rounds, looked crisp, looked sharp, looked perfect. He looked as many levels, above Salka as people expected him to be. And so, again, there's no harm done and he stayed busy. That's about as good as he could have expected it to go, and it went. So, obviously, we're hoping the next fight's going to be a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more competitive, but for what it was, he did about as well as you could have expected. In the co-featured bout of the evening, junior welterweight titleist Lamont Peterson beat down, wore down, and eventually stopped the very game but overmatched Edgar Santana. Santana got a couple right hands in. He worked the left hook from time to time, but those body shots Peterson was laying into him, especially that left hook, just sapped all the energy and all the snap out of his shots, and Peterson was allowed to just, do some work. I mean, effectively, he was able to showcase every bit of skill that he has. He has the ability to box. He has, a little bit of pop to his punches. Nothing major. He's not going to wreck anyone necessarily with a single solitary shot most of the time, but he does have enough pop. It was, he definitely had some eye-catching shots in there, and he was allowed to do it because he completely overmatched his opponent, and it was, again, a decent performance considering the circumstances. Those 2 fights were obviously marred with a lot of criticism, and to a certain extent it was due, considering that they weren't the greatest fights of all time. The good news is, at the very least, that potentially these 2 bouts that people sort of hated on, at the very least, could potentially lead to a meaningful, interesting junior welterweight clash between Garcia and Peterson later this year, maybe, October, November, December, somewhere in perhaps the 4th quarter of the year. So, win and a lose in the sense that we lose out, we get these fights, but let's face facts, boxing fans are going to watch the fights anyway. And you potentially get a strong showing from both guys, as it should have been, that potentially leads to that fight. So it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the best thing in the world either, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And in the opening bout of the major broadcast, it was middleweight Danny Jacobs stopping Australia's Jarrod Fletcher, capturing a portion of the title at 160 pounds. You could say what you want about the title. Yes, it's stupid. Anyone who cares about any of those titles is obviously going to think it's absurd or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think all the titles are absurd except for one. And right now, that champion at 160 pounds is Miguel Cotto. So anything else to me is just, it is what it is. That if you want those sort of titles floating around and you think they matter, then you got to kind of go by their rules. And their rules say they can put out pretty much as many champions as they want, and apparently everyone just buys into it. So, it is what it is. I don't go for it, so I don't really care what you want to call it. But regardless of what you think about the title situation, obviously Jacobs is a great story. He's come back from being, having his first loss at sort of an upset against Dmitry Pirog. Had some outside the ring situations going on during that fight, but regardless, he lost the fight. Then shortly thereafter found out that he, had a rare form of cancer, and then of course was paralyzed from the waist down for a time being. Career was pretty much deemed over. And to come back from that and to, win a meaningful fight, however you want to consider it meaningful, to win a meaningful fight in front of his hometown, in his home crowd, in his hometown. It's definitely a great story, and he got the job done. He stopped Fletcher in the 5th round. I thought he was going to go down and stay down rather in the first round when Jacobs was landing some very hard shots, but To his credit, he actually stuck around a little bit longer. Actually got his feet planted a little bit, but Jacobs' class in the end showed up, and that was all she wrote. After the fight, he said that he's interested in potentially a unification of sorts with Peter Quillen at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Seems like an easy enough fight to make. Seems like a decent fight. And seems like a fight that, for all intents and purposes, is about 50-50. You know, not too bad. So, again, while Fletcher might not have been the greatest name that Jacobs could have proved himself against, at the very least, it sets up that sort of fight you might want to see later on this year, perhaps. So, you know, pretty good stuff all around in terms of later on. As for the fights themselves, you know, they were what they were. It's not, I didn't expect this to be the greatest card that ever existed. So, in any event, that is just about it. So, I want to know what you think. Did you get your picks right? Probably. Did you actually pick the underdogs, and were you somehow thoroughly let down when they somehow didn't deliver, when they really shouldn't have, and no one should have expected that? You know, what do you think of the fights? What do you think about the future fights that could be coming up? Tell me all your thoughts. Please comment, and of course, share the video, like the video, subscribe to 12-Rounder Videos on Twitter, and on YouTube, and follow on Twitter at 12-Rounder Boxing. And of course, be sure to visit 12rounder.com. This is Jay Calderon, and I will see you next time. Enjoy the fights.